Hi, I'm Mara Webster with In Creative Company, and today I'm so excited to be talking about the fantastic visual effects in the TV series TED. We are joined today by the wonderful Brandon Fayette, who is the Viewscreen co-founder and TED Viewscreen Supervisor on the series. And I'd love to just start by kind of talking a little bit about what this technology is, because it's actually astounding. It's basically allowing camera operators and people holding a cell phone to look through and to see animated characters like TED and other visual aspects in real time as you're filming or as you're location scouting. So what was kind of the initial genesis of how this was created and its initial usage?
The initial genesis of it was we were trying to find a way to visualize the invisible. We always run into issues on sets where we're not able to really see the 40-foot spaceship or the 30-foot monster or the little 3-foot bear and really figure out how to block our shots, how to scout it, how to move on with figuring out the basics of just technical side of filming as well as the creative end. And so we ended up working to develop a technology that would let us visualize things not only in location scout, but naturally take it to its conclusion and put it inside of a camera operator's viewfinder. So the big issue was always just how do you show the invisible? And that was the genesis of the entire system.
I also imagine that there's a huge benefit for actors and cast members as well, because when they're acting alongside visual effects and green screen elements, a lot of times we hear the infamous, like, they have to look at a tennis ball on the end of a stick, and with this, even they can take a look and see, okay, Ted's going to be there, and then he's going to be moving like this, and this is exactly what it's going to look like in the scene. So what's the benefit that you've seen in terms of the response from actors in that regard?
So when we work with actors with the technology, what we do is before we dismiss the stand-ins from the lighting of the shot, we'll bring the actors to look at the village and see the character sitting on set, in this case Ted, and they'll be able to see, oh, okay, that's where he's at. We still employ traditional eyeline tools. So for example, you have your 2 ping pong balls that you would be the height of Ted's eyes, but what we'll do is we put view screens Ted directly over it. So not only are the actors still having an eyeline tool so they can see the character in the shot if they forget to look, at this cup or to look at you, they can go, oh yeah, that's Ted. We also are visualizing that for the directors and the camera operators so they can actually film with it. The other thing that we do with actors sometimes is if we're doing an eyeline thing, so here we are on our set and I'm looking here, I could see on a television monitor, for example, Ted sitting right here in between us and go, okay, that's where he's at. So that's where Ted is. Hey buddy, how you doing? And that allows me to self-correct. So actors are really confident when they have an idea to see what things look like, and by visualizing things with Viewscreen, they can see the result of it. So it makes it a little bit more tangible and makes it easier for them to work with.
I also imagine that it changes a lot for Seth McFarlane as well, because when he was doing the movies, he was wearing motion capture, and for this, you're able to kind of capture his facial expressions in real time. So how does that part of the process work in capturing his performance as it's going to be seen on TED in the final version?
So Viewscreen allows us to use motion capture, so we can do suits, we can do the traditional methodologies, as well as new things, but for Seth, we wanted something a little bit less invasive, something that would just get the performance without him having to wear a lot of equipment. So what we do is we put a phone in between the video village monitors, and as he's performing, as he's gesturing, as he's working, we're capturing his body performance, we're capturing his facial performance, we're capturing his head position. And so that gets put directly onto the digital bear, our virtual guy sitting here between us. So as I'm moving my head, the digital TED is matching it. And we even took it a step further, where let's say, for example, Seth is reading lines. So sometimes he'll look at his lines while he's directing and then look up at the screen. We actually have the ability to intercept the head movements and allow the digital bear to have a puppeted head control. So he can do his eye lines without necessarily having to worry about interrupting Seth's performance in the moment. So we built a lot of controls for dynamic performance adjustments of TED or any digital character live in the moment based on what the shot needed.
I also love, I got a chance to see some of the rough cuts of certain scenes where you get to see the technology in place, but also there are moments on the show where, there's an actor kind of like with a bare hand handing something to another actor. And so what's that relationship in terms of having this very advanced technology, but also there being moments where it is useful to still have that for the interaction of a scene?
Well, I think from a visual effects point of view, it's always significantly cheaper to not have to do things like have digital characters interact with humans. So having like a mitten that they can grab where the fur attaches to the finger properly and allows us to occlude it properly will always be beneficial. It's also more tangible because we can actually do pass-offs and handoffs and so on. So hybridizing that with Viewscreen allows us to take that idea of the intangible being tangible, and then the tangible little glove, so that if Ted's sitting there picking a flower and handing it to you, we would have, Allie, who was on set for this, put the Ted glove on and hand you the flower, so you're taking the flower, and then we put the view screen bear on top, kind of moving to match it. And so it allowed us to sync it up enough so that we could get the story of the shot in a way that worked really, really well.
And Ted's a very physical character. There's a lot of movement with him in scenes as well. So how does it work when he's moving around scenes? Because it's much more complicated than just having him sit in the middle of two people. He runs, he walks, he jumps, he goes on a slip and slide in the series.
So one of the things we would do with Viewscreen is we would actually allow you to hybridize the animation. So we could take the walk cycle or the run cycle from the visual effects department and attach that to Ted and control him with a game controller, which was great because then we could take Seth's performance from the upper body up, so his arms gesturing, his face talking, his expressions and so on, and then walk and talk, which is a term for when you're having characters have a conversation while moving, and control it entirely with a hybrid of Ted and virtual puppeteering of the character walking, which meant Seth didn't have to get up and walk in his suit. He didn't have to move. He could stand in place, look at the monitors direct, while the bear was doing what he needed to do. Yeah. And that was really, really useful because we could get some more complex shots that way.
Even just in terms of the way that Ted moves as a character, it's kind of interesting because when you think about just the simple act of Ted walking alongside an in-person actor, you have to kind of think about the speed and the motion. It's like he's much smaller, but you also don't want him to have to be running the whole time. So how did you all set about just figuring out even the speed of like how he was going to move in the show?
So there are a couple ways we would do it. We would do a traditional stuffy pass where we had a stuffed Ted and he would move between the shots, which would inform not only the person who was puppeteering the digital Ted for walk and talk, but also the camera operators. And then we would do a take with the digital Ted doing the same thing. So the camera operators would know not only where to maintain their headroom or how to film it, but they'd actually be able to get that arc of the movement of Ted working pretty well.
And in working with Seth McFarlane, you were originally working with this technology with him on the Orville. What were some of the things that you feel like you were really able to kind of like learn and discover about your own technology on that show that really helped when it came to making Ted?
So on the Orville, we were dealing with 35-foot spaceships and 20-foot creatures and giant set extensions of like worlds and environments. On Ted, we're dealing with a person who's this tall. He is an actor. He is a character in the scene. So it allowed us to take the technology from a accuracy of maybe like a few inches to an accuracy of a millimeter. So now we're actually having Ted, who is around 3 feet tall, perfect across multiple cameras simultaneously. And that was great because we could get so specific with the accuracy that it was just like he was there in all the camera operators viewfinders.
Yeah, that's amazing. Is there any difference in using the technology when you're filming on location versus filming in a studio, or is it just, it kind of like flows in the same way in both spaces?
It flows in the same way. So one of the things about Viewscreen that's really interesting is we're not using calibration codes or markers or cameras. It just runs from the inside out. So we can shoot outside in the middle of the night. We can shoot in the day in a desert. We can be with or without internet. We're not bound to a stage or specific things. It just picks up and goes with you.
So in terms of like building it to begin with, since you obviously didn't have a foundation, you didn't have a roadmap and a blueprint for it, what was the starting point of figuring out how you were going to essentially approach this very insurmountable challenge?
The first version of it was really just, could we drop in any digital asset and see what we could do? And there were different augmented reality solutions, different VR solutions, but the issue is we needed it to be really, really accurate. So that was our first step, was let's just start with the basic thing. Can I just put Ted here? And does Ted just stay here when I move? Does it work when I leave and come back? How can we get perpetual accuracy? So that was the first challenge that felt insurmountable at the moment, but we solved it. And then it was like, okay, now let's make it walk, let's make it talk, let's make it animate. And everything just layered on top of each other, and that helped build the foundation to what it became now.
And with that idea of, roadblocks and challenges along the way, because this is kind of malleable, you're, I imagine, still constantly looking at new uses for it and continued development. What were some of the roadblocks or challenges that you hit along the way in working on TED that you were able to kind of problem solve or figure out new elements of it for along the way?
So one of the issues on TED that we ran into is in the middle of shooting, we decided that it was more economical for Seth's time to not have him in the motion capture suit while we were performing. So up until that point, we were streaming motion capture data of the full body suit directly to the TED asset. So we had a crew hiatus, and internally at Viewscreen, we're like, well, we don't want a puppet that doesn't move. So let's go ahead and do something different. So we developed a full markerless motion capture system that was live to allow us to get his upper body performance, his full body performance if we needed it, and then the facial system. And so in the process of the first few weeks of shooting Ted, we drastically changed the system to be fully live performance captured without the need of something like a cumbersome suit.
I love it. You know, and obviously having worked with Seth McFarlane for such a period of time at this point, what's kind of the shorthand that you feel like you and your team have developed with him just as a creative partnership?
Well, Seth is really technology forward thinking, and he was a big champion of this technology and helped us really not only fund it, but let it grow and let it become the malleable thing that it was. And so one of the things that he loves is things that would help us shoot faster and more efficiently on set, but also help get the point across. We call it the story of the shot. So one of the things that Seth was really, really good at was that exact process of saying, okay, I think this is great, can you try this? So the big push for us to go from a location scouting, animation, and blocking tool to shooting directly in the camera operator's viewfinder and sending it to Director's Village came from Seth. He was like, it'd be really great if we could take this from just you scouting it to something we can actually film with. And so that was a really big push from him at the beginning of 2020, which led to where we are now with the ability to shoot multi-camera anywhere. And he was the inciting incident that really pushed that forward. And we took that challenge on and said, you know what, let's give it a go. And we figured it out.
It's such a great example of just when you imagine things out loud that don't exist, and then you have to know the right people who can actually make it happen.
Yeah, I remember telling him in the moment when he said that, I'm like, okay, I don't know if it's 50-50 if we can make this actually happen, but sure, let's try it and see what happens. He's like, well, give it a go. It's worth giving it a shot and see what happens. And so he believed, and we said, you know what, let's see if we can manifest this thing. And sure enough, it ended up happening. And it was all because of just him saying, you know, hey, I'd love to just see it while I was filming.
Are there any kind of looking back at the experience of working on the series, are there any particular favorite moments just because of the creative challenges that you had to kind of figure out, or just kind of the enjoyment of the moment of putting together certain scenes or certain moments with Ted and this technology?
I think the thing that is really, really powerful is for me, was watching people's reaction when the digital bear just started animating and moving and just came to life. It was like people's eyes light up. It's like you're no longer seeing like a VFX element, you're seeing Ted. And it just flips a switch, which I thought was really, really interesting. And it felt really rewarding to see that we could bring him to life even while we're filming. As a reference, before Blair and the amazing teams, you know, at Framestore and Tippett put the rest of the character together.
No, it's amazing, and I genuinely, you know, from seeing some of like the behind the scenes videos online about how this came together, I think it's astounding, and I'm so impressed in everything you did on the series and working with Seth, so congratulations, and thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.